Keyvan Esfarjani is the Global Chief Operating Officer. You are the head of operations around the world.
Yes, that's right.
For Intel, which is the world's biggest semiconductor manufacturer, the microchips.
Yes.
We are filming this on an Apple phone. How many microchips would be, how many of these chips would be in my phone, for example?
You know, I would guess that there is probably, lots of them, hundreds of them. Depends on what you would consider, to be a microchip. But there's always one big processors. Certainly Intel's processors don't go in the Apple phone, so I won't comment about, Apple products. But nevertheless, I would say all the devices around the world today, they all have microchips, whether they are your refrigerators, all the way to your phones, to your cars, to your computers, to your data centers. So the world is running on chips.
And one thing I've noticed in Davos, more than at any other time before, is the increasing prevalence of electric motor cars. Every one of the big brands has got electric vehicles. And again, this is absolutely critical to the future, is it not?
Yeah, when folks talk about, Bruce, on digitization, if you believe that the world is going to become more digital, well, there's one thing in common in everything that goes digital. They need semiconductors. And it's exciting times, because Intel, being the leader in semiconductor, innovation, and this is Intel pioneered this entire, semiconductor industry back in 50 plus years ago. And I would say, Bruce, that the exciting times ahead of us is really about how do we support the growth of this amazing, unstoppable movement, and that's where really the resiliency and the balance of the global supply chain is more critical than ever before.
But right now we've got a big supply problem, and that is the overly dependence on single geographies and the overly dependence on Asia. And you've been talking this morning here in Davos about a decentralization of manufacture once again, almost taking globalization and regionalizing globalization in a way that means you're not going to be dependent on particular geographies in the future, because some tough lessons have been learned.
Yeah, Bruce, right on. If you look back the last 2 years, the one big lessons learned is having this resilient supply chain is more critical than ever, because when any supply that depends on one particular region of the world and that region gets interrupted, then everybody feels it. So, and in the case of semiconductors, you look back the last 40 years or so, even not two decades ago, United States was about 40% of the world supply of the chips. Europe, another 20-30%. Now it's been declining, significantly. Now 80% of the world supply of the chips is essentially concentrated in Asia. And
that's fine when supply chains are working, but supply chains broke, manufacturing broke.
That's right.
And how do we then de-risk this for the future?
So this is where a global company like Intel, well, we have presence across all over the world, right? This is where when we come in and we are bringing this new capacity online, and we have absolutely put our foot on the gas, and we are making sure that we are putting our investments, our innovation, our capabilities in place in order to bring on the additional capacity needed to support the world needs around chips. So where are our top areas of focus? It's in the United States and in Europe. Now these large investments, of course, Bruce, is going to require both private and public partnership in order to get them off the ground. But clearly we from Intel are taking the leap of faith to make sure that, hey, we are putting the strategy in place. We are bringing this capacity online. You may have heard about our announcements in US. This is a mega site expansion in Ohio. Of course, the back end of this manufacturing of the wafers for building the chips is packaging them. So we announced New Mexico. Of course, our innovations happens in Oregon, Arizona.
You've got new factories coming in Germany. You've got factories coming in Israel and Ireland.
Yes.
This is not deglobalization. This is actually a reglobalization and a de-risking possible.
Exactly. So that was just US. Now, of course, in Europe, we have major operation in Ireland. We have expansions there. We have Israel expansions. Our most recent announcement in Germany expansions, and of course, across the Europe, we have Italy, Spain, all these other Poland. Every location where we support and we have major customers and where we believe this balancing this resilient global supply chain is critical, we are putting our foot forward.
What about the source of minerals? Minerals are critical, of course, to the manufacture of everything from batteries to microprocessors to absolutely everything. And your CEO said this morning that so far you consume 60% of the periodic table, and we all had the periodic table stuck on the back of our bedroom door. How much of that dependence, and I know battery minerals are far more Africa dependent than perhaps microprocessor minerals, but there's copper in there, there's lead in there, there are various minerals. Do you have supply chains across Africa?
I would say, of course our chips, they are at the, very, very small, usage levels at each chip level. Of course we use those copper, tin, tungsten, all these things in our processes. Now I would say when it comes to the rare earths, of course things like, battery, like lithium, and we don't use those, as abundantly into the products that we make. Those are essentially different challenges where, for cars and self-driving vehicles, which of course are going to be like computers, but we supply the chips for those things. Now, of course, we also supply, our raw material, our suppliers, supply the raw materials from all over the world, right? Of course, we have sources coming from Africa. We have sources coming, from parts of Asia. And of course, there is, just like chips for raw materials and minerals, they're also having certain elements very concentrated in Asia as well. So moving forward, just like the supply of the chips, is critical to make sure we have a balance of the supply chain. And this is where places like Africa or other countries, Australia, all these places are going to play a critical role.
There's a reglobalization then in terms of relocating factories and getting diversification of support there. There's diversifying your sources of supply of minerals. And then there's also people. The world is surprisingly resilient, and talent is expensive and increasingly expensive. And it's one of the things driving international inflation. The search for skills is huge as well.
And those have to start at the grassroots. It has to start at the, elementary, high school levels, and really continue to support the young kids coming into the STEM fields, because what we do, this is in technology. That grassroots efforts is something that, of course, our industry, certainly Intel, is taking leadership. We have investments, we're having partnership with the education institutions, and then goes to community colleges, then goes to universities, and that pipeline of talent is absolutely critically important. And once they come into a company like Intel, we are putting significant focus and support to ensure that the folks are trained, and you leverage our very large network of other operations around the world to train folks. But clearly, the field of STEM and continuing to promote and have policies and educational sort of framework to ensure that element of the pipeline of talent is strong, is more critical than ever to support this digitization.
And the future is digital, and it's an exciting future because they're digital in absolutely everything we do. The world also moving from just in time, where the focus has been ensure that you have your supply chains absolutely fine-tuned to perfection, to a world moving to just in case. In case something breaks down, in case a supplier falls over, in case there is a pandemic. Things that were inconceivable 2 years ago have suddenly become a reality with which people like yourself have to grapple.
This is clearly the lesson learned the last 2 years, is having a just in case plans in place is extremely critical, and that requires the entire infrastructure, the people capability, the regulatory environment. Building a semiconductor factory, it's not just a small operation. This requires power, water, as you noted, the education system all around it. So this is really the call to action for both the public and private to really come together to support this critical growth needed. And to your point, and this talent is not just coming in and just building widgets on each other. What it takes to produce the chips needed for the future, this is, you're pushing the limits of science and technology to the next level. This is physics, material science, going deep into the atomic and almost at the DNA size level to see, hey, how do we make these systems, work even better? Because this industry has been going on what's called the Moore's Law, where the number of transistors keeps doubling every couple of years.
Is Moore's law still alive and well?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of speculation that Moore's law has reached its limits. It can't double computing power every, 3 years or whatever the law said. Is it still very much in place?
Bruce, this has been the same question 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it's still alive, and well. And it's continuing. Intel has laid out its roadmap, at least for the next, several years, which is all in the lockstep to the Moore's Law. And we believe, the human mind, the innovation will continue to push it forward.
How important?
And in 10 years from now, we'll have the same question.
What is the role of the human mind then into the future? Because so much of what
Yes.
you do is not only in using the devices that we use today, whether it be our motor cars, whether it be our fridges, or whether it be our phones, it's artificial intelligence and the role of artificial intelligence in our future. People are terrified of a Robocop future. You still put a huge store in the human mind.
We view it as, computing and digitization helps you to solve problems because they are more complex. Just the topic of supply chain.
Yeah.
Once you start looking at it, you realize how complex it is. That me and you with our spreadsheet is going to be very hard to figure those things out. This is where the role of AI and using these tools to help us with making better decisions. That's what and this is where, whether it's even Moore's Law, whether it's pushing the limits of the capabilities of our supply chain, go deep into the next level of tiers of our supply. This is something that we believe that this is just one example where AI can come into play. Of course, the application of it into self-driving cars, the application of it into healthcare. You look across the spectrum. These are tools that are now capable because of the advancement in the computing. The AI is not a new theory. It was talked about 40 years ago. However, with the advances in computing, with the capabilities that are available today, now it's manifesting itself. Now it's coming to the light.
Andy Grove, your founder,
Yes.
Said crises kill bad companies, good companies survive,
Yes.
great companies thrive.
Yes.
Does it still apply?
That's what Intel is all about. We absolutely we are not letting go of these crises. We are learning from it, of course, with Pat on board and our IDM 2.0 strategy. This is where Intel is expanding. Intel is driving technology forward in unprecedented investment in the history of our company. And anytime anybody blinks, we are like, no, absolutely stay on course. So we're excited. The road ahead is exciting. And certainly Intel is taking the lead, and we're so encouraged by the support and the partnership across everybody around Intel, whether it's our customer, whether it's the public, or the places that we're going. Exciting times, Bruce.
Keyvan Esfarjani, thank you very much indeed. Global Head of Supply Chains and Manufacturing Planning for the Future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Pleasure.